Sometimes you'll be browsing through some tournament data, and every now and then you'll come across a deck list that you haven't seen before that doesn't show up a lot in tournament listings. And in this case, I was looking through some Chilean tournament data, and for those of you that don't know, Chile still has a pretty large base Neo following. So big shout out to Jamie M that shows up down in the comments quite often. He's a part of that following. But the deck in question that I saw that had a placing was Dark Golduck. So I immediately went to see what was actually going on with this deck, why Dark Golduck, and I had to build it for myself. And after playtesting a bit, I gotta say, it is not bad at all. It's very simple, very straightforward, but it's also very fluid in the way it plays. It's a great deck for beginners because it is so fluid and easy to use, but also for more seasoned players like myself. This is a very refreshing deck to use, especially if you're deep into base Neo like I have been making all of these videos, because Dark Golduck does utilize some aspects of the game that you don't see a whole lot in this particular metagame. So let's just get into this deck and you'll see what I'm talking about. This deck does include Cleffa, so it's not completely rogue, but this is a bit of a budget deck. There are some rares in here, but there aren't really any cards that are going to cost you more than $2 or $3. Really, the most expensive card is probably going to be Focus Band. The first card we come to that makes this deck interesting is Fossil Psyduck, which I had almost completely forgotten about, even though it also has a Black Star promo version. Take a look at that first attack. It's basically like Slowking Light. Now, Slowking was banned from this format. I don't include it in any of the decks because post-base Neo era, it was banned from the format. But this Psyduck is allowing you to trainer lock your opponent the first turn that you attack, which is pretty astounding and does kind of surprise me that it was overlooked for so long. And of course, we are going to be evolving that Psyduck into Dark Golduck, who has psychic-based attacks, even though it's not a psychic type. But you have to remember, towards the end of base Neo format, a lot of fire decks like Blaine's Rapidash were really making their way through the format, especially in the Chilean format. Looking through that tournament data, I realized that there's a lot of Blaine decks that were becoming big at the time. So if you could have a deck that is utilizing psychic energy, but you have a water type attacker, that opens up a new avenue to include another card in this deck like Black Star promo Mewtwo. And I brought it up a lot in the last video, but this Mewtwo is one of the best Haymaker cards. It is the best psychic type attacker for this format in my opinion, and its Psyburn attack is actually pretty similar to Dark Golduck's Super Psy, but Dark Golduck is going to actually be dealing 50 damage, and that can really come into play when you're talking about basics that have 50 or 60 HP, because Dark Golduck has the ability to utilize a Darkness energy. So if you throw that on there, it's going to be able to deal 60 damage off of 3 energy with Super Psy. And speaking of the inclusion of Dark Energy, Murkrow is also going to be a big player in this deck. You know, like I've said multiple times before as well, Murkrow is one of the most underrated cards of base Neo format because of the combo it can pull off by itself with Mean Look and Feint Attack. You can really target babies on the bench, you can target Pokemon that already have damage on them and snipe them when Murkrow's your active. This is a pretty simple lineup that you can actually get a lot of work done with because you can trainer lock with Psyduck, you can draw cards with Dark Golduck, you can lock your opponent's active with Murkrow, and then you have 2 pretty great Haymaker cards to clean up with. And then for the support, we do have 2 Elm, 2 Oak, and then 2 Traders, because there are some different scenarios where you might want to trade one Pokemon for another, get exactly the one you need in your hand, especially when you're trying to evolve up into those Dark Golducks. And there is a decent combo you can pull off there where you're drawing cards, and then later just using Pokemon Center and discarding 1 Psychic Energy off of that Dark Golduck to heal it completely up. And in that way, it can serve as like a bonus setup card. And then you have a full playset of Double Gust. That's going to be very important for this deck because you are going to be pulling off some of those combos with Dark Golduck where you're discarding all the energy off of it and then swapping into a fully charged Dark Golduck or a Mewtwo that's on your bench. And if you really enjoy the healing and swapping aspect of this deck, you can always bump up that trainer count for Pokemon Center to a full playset. That is no problem at all. I only include 2 in this deck because it's more of a utility card. You're not going to be using it all that often. And we have Item Finder so that you can reuse and recycle all of the trainers in this deck that you want to, but mainly I found myself using Item Finder just to get back a Focus Band or a Double Gust. If you ever did want to make this a full-blown budget deck, maybe you don't want to spend the money on it, but you do want to play this deck, just take out the Focus Band, take out the Cleffa, and the deck won't run too differently. It will be noticeable because you'll have a bit slower setup. Your Golducks and your Psyducks aren't going to stay alive as long, but the deck will still work the same way even without those two cards, and you can save quite a bit of money just by cutting out the Cleffa. And those Focus Bands are primarily for Psyducks that you'll be using to trainer lock your opponent, because we're also running a great stadium in this deck that's going to be giving Dark Golduck an extra 20 HP. The Nightly Garbage Run is in here to get back those Psyducks. They can be pretty important, especially late game. If you need to stall your opponent's setup for a turn while you lay a couple more energy down on a Mewtwo or a Golduck as a Haymaker card, then Psyduck can be really useful in just throwing out there and getting a headache off. 3 copies of Rocket's Hideout to give Dark Golduck that extra 20 HP, and also to be as a counter gem. Yeah, 3 stadiums is a bit too much, but I like to use that third one just as a counter gem because your opponent most likely will not be using any Pokemon with Dark in their name, so they're not going to be getting any benefits, and it's a great way to get rid of something like Chaos Gem that can really slow down this deck. And then there will be a full playset of Dark Energy for Dark Golduck and also Murkrow. Because there only are 4 copies that you can use in this deck, you will be deciding kind of one way or the other which is most important. Do you want that extra 10 damage on Golduck, or do you want to lock your opponent's active with Murkrow? And it's going to depend mainly on what kind of deck you're up against. And the rest of the deck is going to be filled out with Psychic Energy. No water energy in this deck required, even though you do have a water type attacker. So the ideal setup, the ideal start will be a Cleffa, just to get off an Eek early on if you can, but also Psyduck doesn't make a very bad choice either because it can use Headache for only 1 energy, and that means that your opponent is not going to get their setup as quickly as they would like. They're going to have to rely on Eek to refresh their hand, but they're also going to have tons of trainers in their hand that they can't use. If you find yourself in situations where you do want to get that Haymaker ball rolling faster, then I would suggest just replacing the 2 Professor Elms with Oaks. That way you can get Psychic Energy into your discard and then use Mewtwo's Energy Absorption as fast as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be a little more difficult to get those energy into the discard and fully utilize Mewtwo as a Haymaker card. Energy Charge is another addition that you might want to consider if you're worried about a lot of energy removals and super energy removals, which were pretty common in this format, that are going to be discarding those dark energies that are limited in this deck. You only have 4 copies that you're spreading amongst 2 different Pokemon. So depending on your playstyle and the decks that you're playing against, you may want to take out those Focus Bands completely. Maybe Rocket's Hideout is providing enough extra HP to where you don't really need the Focus Bands as much. You can take those out and replace them with Energy Charge so that you're getting that extra 10 damage off of your Dark Golducks and you're able to fully use your Murkrows every game. Recycle Energy would be another great addition, as all 3 of your attackers could utilize it, but I do prefer to just have the plain basic Psychic Energy in the deck so that Energy Absorption can be fully utilized. But one problem with this deck is that Golduck does require 3 energy for Super Psy, so if you want to make sure that one of them isn't getting wasted, you could lay down a Recycle Energy on there. But part of the strategy with this deck is using Pokemon Center on Golduck so that its energy is being discarded, and then you can Double Gust into Mewtwo and absorb those energies onto your brand new attacker. This deck can get stomped pretty hard by bigger decks like Rocket Zapdos or Metal Chansey, even Sneasel. So to try to combat that, I took out the Murkrow and replaced them with Mr. Mime. And for those scenarios, Mr. Mime is definitely the better choice. But for the most part, the Murkrow does work better because in those cases, Mr. Mime just serves as another psychic attacker, which Mewtwo is already doing the job. I'm very interested in hearing opinions about this deck. I would love for other people to try it and tell me how it played out for them, especially when compared to the Psychic Toolbox deck that I posted recently. This was just such a fun surprise that I wanted to share. So if you do want to see more decks, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to find me on Instagram, you can get me at Drunk Shuckle. And until next video, bye.